The story of the Tower of Babel has been interpreted in so many ways that we could spend the rest of the day just listing the possibilities. Some have interpreted the story to cast cities in a negative light, since the people say, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city." Some have suggested that the story is told as a reason for the existence of different languages on earth. After all, Genesis is all about beginnings, so maybe others have suggested this story is about the beginning of different languages. And still others have suggested that this story is little more than an expression of human pride. Those explanations and interpretations are all perfectly possible, but a little too easy. There is far more to the story than first meets the eye or ear. And on the day of Pentecost, there is such an emphasis on language and being understood that the great trap is to present the story of Pentecost as the reversal or the corrective to the Tower of Babel. The scholars who arranged our lectionary put the two stories together on this day, and the easy way out is to say that Pentecost was the great undo of the Tower of Babel. I've preached that idea along the way. So let's dive into this story and see what we might want to look at in new ways and where the Spirit may be leading us this morning. Now, the whole earth had one language and the same words. That's how the story begins, but not really. You have to go back one verse to get the setup. These are the families of Noah's sons, according to their genealogies in their nations. And from these the nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. And way before that, you have to go all the way back to Genesis 1, where God tells the human beings, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God's purpose and plan for human beings is clear. Fill the earth, care for the earth, be responsible for the earth. So the people are migrating from the east, we are told. They are on the move. They are meeting God's charge and commission to spread abroad and to fill the earth and subdue it. And then they stop. As they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. The Hebrew word is yasav, which means to dwell or to sit. The bottom line is the people have stopped moving. They have stopped spreading abroad. They have stopped filling the earth. What comes next? Let's make bricks. That one will come back to haunt their descendants, who will be making bricks in the land of Egypt. We've got bitumen to hold the bricks together. Another use of bitumen or pitch would be to waterproof a basket for a baby placed in a river. Don't forget, this story is being written most likely during the days of captivity in Babylon, long after Moses and the Exodus from Egypt. Hey, with bricks and mortars, let's build a city. And right smack dab in the middle of it, let's build a tower, a ziggurat, that will reach all the way up to heaven. And we'll plaster our name on it in big gold letters so that everyone will be impressed with our achievement and will pay attention to us. And then they say, because if we don't, we will be scattered abroad upon the face of the earth. Now, wait a minute. Isn't that what God wanted them to do? Didn't God want them to fill the earth, to spread abroad, to have dominion, to be responsible? Then we are told God comes down to see their city. In an older translation, it says, God stooped down. God had to stoop down to see the greatness of humankind It's a wonderful image. God comes down, sees their city, and is frankly impressed. This is only the beginning of what they will be able to do. Nothing they propose to do will now be impossible for them. They've stopped moving. They are building. They are challenging God's intention for them. So what did God do? God got them moving again. God confused their language. That is to say, God gifted them with differing languages. Various languages appeared, and we are left to assume that the people who could understand each other gathered together and moved in a particular direction. Humankind was no longer settled and sitting. They were moving again, spreading abroad, doing what God had commanded and commissioned them to do. We usually think of scattering and dividing as negative actions, the result and consequence of disobedience. We think that the reason God varied their languages was because God was angry or outraged or irate or even a little intimidated. But that's not in the text. God varied their languages so that they would continue meeting the challenge of being obedient to the way and will of God, which was to spread abroad, fill the earth, subdue it. We often see and think of diversity as less desirable than unity. We like the idea of everyone being the same, thinking the same, speaking the same. We don't want people who aren't just like us to intrude on our comforts and our contentments. But God sees diversity in a different way. God sees diversity as a holy thing. God sees diversity as a way for the world to be what God imagined it to be. Just look at the world. If God did not see diversity as a good thing, there would be only cats. If God did not see diversity as a good thing, there would be only white flowers. If God did not see diversity as a good and noble thing, there would be blandness and a featureless quality to creation. And when we can escape our prejudices and preconceptions, we can begin to see the beauty and wonder in every kind of people of every kind of language. We don't always believe that in our cozy Midwestern town. We don't always welcome those whose skin is a different color or whose native culture differs from our own or whose native language is not English. We still make our disparaging comments about people who eat food that we do not eat and observe holidays we do not observe and who dress in clothing that is different from our own. But when we grow up into being the people God created us to be, we can begin to see the beauty and wonder in all people, from all places, of every language and custom, of every orientation. We begin to experience the wonder and splendor of the diversity in the world all around us. We begin to see the world as a multifaceted jewel. We begin to understand the height and depth and breadth of this miraculous and mysterious creation. Thomas Berry, one of the first eco-theologians, told us, diversity is the magic. It is the first manifestation, the beginning of the differentiation of a thing and of simple identity. The greater the diversity, the greater the perfection. So when the day of Pentecost had come, and those first disciples began speaking in other languages so that people from all over the known world could hear and understand, it is interesting that God did not create one universal language, but enabled people to hear the good news in their own language. If God was going to undo Babel, God would have given one new universal language to take people back to the days when the tower was built. But God didn't do that. God made it so everyone could hear, could listen in their own language. God celebrated the diversity of the world. God delighted in the good news of God's love being heard by everyone, with the implication that this good news would not be spread abroad without them moving abroad and taking it to every corner of the world where disciples could be made, baptized, and taught. On that Pentecost long ago, the Spirit came among the infant church in ways so powerful that it empowered a small band of believers to go out and change the world. Maybe we get so caught up in telling the story year after year that we fail to stop and think about what it truly means. Archbishop Desmond Tutu gave it to us in these words: we are made for goodness. We are made for love. We are made for friendliness. We are made for togetherness. We are made for all of the beautiful things that you and I know. We are made to tell the world that there are no outsiders. All are welcome. Black, white, red, yellow, rich, poor, educated, not educated, male, female, gay, straight, all. We all belong to this family, this human family, God's family. We are a diverse and varied people. We are distinct and different, assorted and sundry. But we are one, bound together by the Spirit of God and deeply loved by God Almighty. We are Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs, citizens of Evansville, Newburgh, Boonville, Morganfield, Henderson, Chicago, Denver, and all the parts of Indiana belonging to Vanderburgh, Warwick, Posey, and Gibson counties, former Methodists, Baptists, Catholics, evangelicals, and even Lutherans. And together, each of us and all of us have seen and heard and experienced for ourselves the deeds of God's awesome power. Like patches of an assorted fabric combine to form a beautiful quilt, we are a diverse people, bound together by God's Spirit into a fabric of faith that we are to spread abroad in the world God made. Let us be God's people, many and one, for now and evermore. Amen.